Hello, welcome to the PhoneWord workshops. Today is Wednesday, February the 11th, 2015, and today we're going to be talking about DNS, which is the domain name system, and blockchain technology, and what might be possible by combining those two items. So, my name is Jay Carpenter. I am the founder of the PhoneWord workshops, and I welcome you today. So there might be a few other people joining us, but let's just go ahead and jump right in. Take a look at the presentation, which is at phonewordworkshops.com, and we'll go over that and then see if there's some other folks that join us. So going into the screen share, and so this is the presentation for February. For those of you that might not be familiar with the PhoneWord workshops, we have two sessions. One is on the second Wednesday of the month, and it starts at 5 p.m. Eastern Time, and that's today's session. And the other session is on the third Wednesday of the month, which will be February 18th, and that will start at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. So the intention is we're exploring areas of innovation that might be available for new realms of naming, addressing, and numbering. And today we're going to talk about what might be possible with collaboration, exploration, and experiments, specifically in the area of blockchain technology, domain name system, or DNS, and what would it look like combining the two. And then we'll talk a little bit about summary and next steps. Overall, this is one of the dimensions of what is being addressed, which is we have all these disparate addresses today: email addresses, Twitter handles, Facebook addresses, bank accounts, postal addresses, telephone numbers, all sorts of barcodes, QR codes, all this stuff, and none of it really works together. What if it all worked together? What if there was some harmony that was available in bringing all these disparate addresses together so that we have some control over them as the end users, and B, they could work in a more of a unified fashion, if not an outright unified fashion. So that's the overall intention of the PhoneWord workshops, and we're in the area of exploration and innovation. Specifically, last month and this month, we're looking at the component blockchain technology. Okay, what is that? How could that be valuable in this realm? So for those of you that might not be familiar with blockchain technology and what is a blockchain, well, my simplest explanation of blockchain is it's sort of like a title history. So we're all familiar with title histories, or many of us are familiar with title histories related to real estate, maybe related to automobile ownership and so forth. Well, something's emerged over about the last 6 years called blockchain. And blockchain is the foundation of the most famous application is something called Bitcoin, which is a crypto security or cryptocurrency and has gained quite a bit of popularity, but it's still in its very infant stages. Well, what's possible with blockchain is much more than just currency. Blockchain can be applied to wide spectrum of applications, areas where trust is involved and security is involved. So I've talked about this in some other sessions. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, but that in a nutshell is what we're talking about with blockchain technology. And we're talking about a construct that has decentralized trust. So there isn't a central authority, there isn't a central entity, there isn't a central committee that is the source and the holder of this trust element. It's actually distributed among the entire community that's involved in the blockchain. So why is that important? Why do we care? Particularly in the realm of telecommunications and legacy naming, addressing, and numbering. Well, it matters because this blockchain could be the authority for creating things like registries, like internet domain registries. And that's particularly what we're focusing on today. So I picked out 3 presentations that I thought started to address this in a manner that would be valuable to folks that might be interested in this area. And the first presentation is by a fellow named, I'm probably going to screw up his name, but Matthias Vonder, and he does about almost an hour presentation from the CCC event, and he talks about many aspects of DNS, but about 40, I believe it's 47 minutes, 46 seconds into the presentation, he starts to talk about Namecoin. What is Namecoin? Well, Namecoin is the first fork of the Bitcoin open source code. And this happened several years ago, but one of the first areas of interest after Bitcoin was announced and released was this idea of, okay, how do we register addresses? How do we register? Could we have used this blockchain and start to create something new in terms of a decentralized trust model that could facilitate the registration of things like domain names? And that's where the Namecoin originated. And we can actually take a look here. This is the Namecoin website. You can learn about it at namecoin.info. What does it do? Learn about it, how it works. I'm still exploring this myself, but this is Namecoin. And in my reading and learning about blockchain, about Bitcoin, and so forth, Namecoin seems to be coming up fairly frequently. So in the presentation from the CCC, he talks about how Namecoin is a peer-to-peer based naming system and namespace controlled by a majority or the community and not a centralized instance. And this is a huge factor in my view. It was a fork of the Bitcoin code, and it has some of the similar characteristics, and it is available. I think there's a couple 100,000 registrations in it now, but don't quote me on that. And it is DNS-like. So let me go to the presentation. This is the presentation, and indeed 47 minutes, 44 seconds or so into it, he starts talking about Namecoin. He talks about some of the advantages, some of the disadvantages, and some of the problems that exist with Namecoin interfacing with the DNS architecture. So that is a brief, very brief introduction to Namecoin. The next item, and there you can see the video, the YouTube video, and there's a link down here to the video. This video is also posted at PHONEWORDworkshops.com, and you can watch it there as well as going on to YouTube. So the next item is that I selected to highlight this idea of adding naming, addressing, and numbering to a blockchain construct is a presentation by a couple of fellows, Joel and Joris. I'm not even going to try to pronounce their last names. You can go to this video, which is right here, and this was basically done about a year ago, almost a year ago, which also highlights the sort of the use case of this naming, addressing, and numbering being added to the blockchain. This was shortly after something called Ethereum was announced, and basically what happened was someone took the Ethereum white paper, and even before Ethereum's, the code for Ethereum is fully released, they built this contract using these 5 lines of code, 5 or 6 lines of code, and they've created a way to do registration in a manner, and I'm not quite clear on this, in a manner that's using Namecoin or like Namecoin. So I think this is pretty powerful because it's adding some logic to something that's normally doesn't use logic, which is a registry. And here they're putting in certain, very basic criteria for a registration. And I think this is, first of all, it's almost a year old, which is a long time in this space. So there might be things that you could do today that are more advanced than what they were demonstrating in this video, but I think it demonstrates a powerful use case that not only is here today, 2015, but to some degree was available about a year ago. So for people that are interested in the enum space, electronic number mapping, people that are interested in, what can be constructed as we start to retire the legacy public switch telephone network, there's, I think, a rich opportunity using this blockchain technology and the DNS structure itself and DNS-like architecture to create something that's very, very powerful. And this is why I've been spending a lot of time and research time and energy to learn about the blockchain and what's possible. So going on to the next slide, this is the second part of what these two fellows did to demonstrate how this could work. And this is on this video, which again was done about a year ago, March 4th, 2014, sometime in that time frame. And what this does is it shows how the code that was shown in the last section, how it could actually be implemented, how you could execute a contract using this interface, a simulator actually of the Ethereum code and platform as it's envisioned to be. So I think this is pretty powerful, and I haven't played with the code. The code is available on GitHub, and it's open source. So there is an opportunity to play around with this, and you can, here's the link to the YouTube video. And, you know, for those of you that are inclined, this is kind of a beginning step to experiment with domain name like registration using a blockchain construct. But not only the blockchain, but also adding some, let's say, rules, intelligence, if you will, using some logic like what's being proposed with the Ethereum platform and Ethereum ecosystem. So that's what we're talking about today. I don't have any code at this point to play around with this, and today is just part one of a two-part series. Perhaps by next week on February the 18th, there'll be something that's a little more advanced. One of the points that I'd like to emphasize is that this really is a global opportunity, and it's an opportunity that starts to be, let's say, universal across countries, across borders, and so forth. So it really starts to flatten out the barriers to entry, the barriers that have existed in the enum realm, which is has been trying to address, okay, how are we going to create a registry that has authority from someplace? Well, guess what? This blockchain starts to open up a decentralized authority for the registration associated with naming, addressing, and numbering, and it's spread across the entire community that is interested in this. And I think that's a very interesting and very powerful new approach to what's been attempted in the past. So here's the next steps. The next steps are to continue to explore what's possible within innovation and opportunity sets here, to continue to collaborate and create open source software, to experiment with what's the possibility federating enum registries and tying those registries in some form or fashion to a blockchain construct, which I'm still exploring in terms of what are the pros and cons of that, to continue to experiment with dispute resolution, which is a key element for the whole registry concept, experiment with governance. Many people that have been involved in the enum realm have wrestled with, okay, how's the governance going to work on this, in this ecosystem? I think there's also, what I'm finding out is there's some very interesting and powerful tools out there to experiment with a platform today. And I am intending to experiment with that, and hopefully there'll be some other folks that are interested in experimenting with that. In the future, we hope to have some guest presenters and also some outright coding sessions. So that's pretty much the scope of what we're playing with today and investigating. And you can follow along at PHONEWORDworkshops.com. And again, in another week, we'll have another session at 11 a.m. on February the 18th 2015, 11 a.m. Eastern Time. You're welcome to tune in then. And today's session is just basically an introduction and a very quick survey of what is already out there that might enable this naming, addressing, and numbering construct associated, possibly associated with a blockchain architecture. So I'm going to stop the screen sharing and let's see. So if you have any questions, please feel free to contact me. You can find my contact information at PHONEWORDworkshops.com. I continue to think that although the blockchain seems exotic, seems in its infancy, since some people in the traditional telecommunications realm are talking about creating test beds, creating new platforms to experiment with how are things going to work when the legacy telephone network, the public switch telephone network or copper network is retired. In my view, the value proposition, the components that are associated with blockchain, the blockchain architecture, are worth investigating and experimenting with today. Because if a platform, a whole registrar, registry, registrant ecosystem is going to be explored and created, it's my view that the blockchain construct that's emerging now fits into that whole initiative, or could fit into that whole initiative, and could be a very important piece. So in the past, during the PHONEWORD workshops, we've talked about, what would it look like with a federation of registries? What would it look like incorporating WebRTC, which is a browser-to-browser, peer-to-peer construct? And what would it look like incorporating blockchain architecture as well? So thank you for watching this, and I invite you to participate in the future and join us next week when we continue the conversation and explore what's possible and what's next. Thank you. Thank you for your attention.